everyone. Welcome to another weekly Azure update here on Azure Centric. And first of all, I want to thank all of our subscribers, our new subscribers, and all the people that they are seeing these in all the social media on Azure Centric, or mine, or everyone that's sharing and helping grow the Azure Centric. And thank you for the feedback that we are receiving. So this week we have a plenty of agenda. With me, I have my partner in crime, Andrew Lowes, to talk about nice features that was released this week, and some cool new stuff, right, Andrew? How are you doing, my friend?
Thank you, Marcos. Yes, thanks for having me, as always. I really appreciate it. It's a pleasure to chat with you and all of our listeners here through Azure Centric.
Exactly.
So, yeah, we had a really busy kind of like a week and a half here. There's a lot of stuff kind of on the menu here tonight.
Yeah.
But we also have kind of an interesting one. So the first one is AZ Predictor. And I know it's not really an Azure blog update, but it is an Azure update. It's for CLI. And one of the things that's really exciting about this is, well, it does what it says. It predicts what we're typing. So I've been using the inline mode. You can also do list view, but really just kind of for reference, it's a lot like the old Visual Studio.NET IntelliSense that we had. So we get a little bit of that in Visual Studio Code. And, this is really, it just keeps rolling forwards. This is the next stage, I think, looking forwards. But it's a really awesome feature because it tells us all of the parameters that are commonly used based on what you type historically. So you can configure some options with AZ Predictor, and it gets used to kind of your own history for what you usually use for parameters. So if you always use like Canada East for your location, it will automatically start to populate Canada East as your location as you're typing in CLI. So there's some really cool things. What's one of the things that you liked about that? I know we were both a little excited about this one.
Yes,
this week.
I remember that I did tell you, say, hey, we should include this in our podcast because it's like you said really well. It's not related, or it's not coming on Azure blog, but it's related to Azure, and it's tacky and it's geek, right? The good thing I like about this is it sometimes, and a lot of the listeners and the subscribers that they are listening to this podcast or seeing this podcast on YouTube, they are starting to on PowerShell, or probably they are starting PowerShell on Azure. Not starting PowerShell, but starting PowerShell on Azure. And I know that module for module, it really differentiates. This is basically only for the Azure PowerShell module. So they have about 4,000 commandlets, as you see on the blog post that they announced. But the part that I like about these is a lot of those, even on the new PowerShell commands or even on the new features that they are releasing, there are some of those things that they are mandatory. And what I love about this is show us what is mandatory or not. In this case, in the example that you can see on the screen, is creating a new Azure resource group, and the mandatory is the name and the location. Like you said, if we pre-populated and starting to using this and starting to configure that we want some of those things already pre-populated, like you said, the location. In this case, we just type new AZR, and then we just use the tab, and basically just need to give the name, and that's it. And we create a resource group for this particular example. The good thing about that I like about this, like you mentioned, For me, it's a little bit of a mixture of two things. Visual Studio Code, the IntelliSense that is brilliant, that I love on Visual Studio Code, and a little bit of PowerShell ISE. Because in PowerShell ISE, it gives us a little bit of where you need to put it, but it's too much information. This is only the required information for you to create the object or to run that script. And that's the part that I love about this. But again, this is only the starting. We highly recommend you to just search for this. There is some goals, there is some examples that you can see on the blog. And again, this is very early stages, but we already have about 4,000 command lines, right?
Yeah, and that's a good point. So it is brand new, but one of the really cool things, and I think it's part of why we do this chat, is because the group that's producing this is looking actively for our feedback from the Microsoft community. So if you use this, you have suggestions, you have, it might be nice to mention the odd thank you for the teams as well. Sometimes it's nice to hear we're doing a good job. So check out their page, check out their post, and down towards the bottom, they're looking for feedback. They have a little survey. So provide a little bit of a thank you for them. It takes a lot of work to produce this kind of a product, this feature, and to make sure that all of the integration works. And if we don't thank these hardworking folks, then they just don't know that. Yeah. They don't know we appreciate it. So I'm actually, I do have that open, and I haven't submitted my kudos for that team yet. But I think, little nod for the team there. Really well done. I look forward to seeing future versions of this come out. It's very helpful for me. And I think one of the cool things too is, sorry, I know I was about to wrap it up and I just thought, Marco, I was just thinking, if you're new to using the AZ commandlets, this is really cool because, you simply just start typing the commandlet that you're learning or you're going through, and you can see what the required parameters are. So it's another hands-on way that we can do more learning. So I'm going to play with it a little bit more. I know that we're going to geek out a little bit with this one. Yeah. So I look forward to the next version.
For sure. And for all the people that they are listening and they are not seeing the screen, the link for you to just submit that is aka.ms/AZ Predictor Survey. Just go there. You can always come back and listen again the podcast, but just search it and give feedback, because this is the part that I like about these last years of Microsoft. Is they listen what we are saying, and they really reply, and they really like that, and that's a very good point of view.
Yeah, it's really quite community based, and in these early stages when they're looking for feedback, we can help shape what the product ends up to be when it comes out for full release. Yeah. So I think it's really cool, and like you said, this is the new Microsoft, and I think this is just how we all shine. So excellent.
Okay, so moving forward, let's go to the next one. It's time for geekness, right? So it's time for benchmarks, and it's time to just blow our mind. So Microsoft this week just recently come up with a new small VM with about 86,400 cores. Something small, right? That we need.
720 VMs merged, the HBV2 VMs merged together to make 86,000 cores. That's crazy.
It is absolutely amazing what these guys are doing. I don't know. I really want to to try to put like probably I will spend like $100 in the first 3 seconds of spinning up these VMs just for the fun, just for taking a very, very quick print screen and say, look guys, look what I did, and just for playing Tetris or something like that, right? Because we need that amount of power. But just joke aside, is unbelievable how Azure is doing this, and a little bit of more specs that you can see on the screen. 720 nodes that will become one VM. In this case, the new way to do it, that is the NAMD, and it's basically for bioscience, if I'm not mistaken. If I see over here, it's for bioscience. So it's the first cloud. They say over here that it's the first cloud 1 terabyte second parallel file system. 1 terabyte per second. It's unbelievable what these guys are doing, and that's
yeah. So the blog post does detail the file system, and they talk about it's running so basically spanned systems the same way we would span disks. It's using 300 VMs with 250 terabytes of NVMe storage, and they're achieving 1.46 terabytes per second of read performance and 456 gigabytes, not bits, bytes per second of write performance. My laptop can't do that. I don't know about your your big beast, but mine can run a lot of Hyper-V systems at once, and I can't compete with that. 300 VMs, 250 terabytes of NVMe storage.
And it's not only that.
What do you say? That's definitely
you have like
supercomputer.
If you read and you go into the details like we're doing right now, we have 287 terabytes of distributed memory. Are you kidding me? 287 terabytes. It's like
So this kind of ties in. I think for the last really 2 or 3 weeks, we've had different healthcare announcements kind of phasing in. And as Microsoft is growing in this vertical market, and they're really creating and what's the right word here? Maybe dedicating these resources. They're coming up with new creative ways that science and medicine can utilize Azure computing resources to further science. This is amazing. This is amazing stuff. So it is the cloud's first terabyte per second parallel file system. So yet again, Azure's achieved another notch in the belt, another cloud first.
What I like about this is showing that really Azure is leading the way on this type of high performance computing, right? And if you see this graph, it's like the highest on the other cloud, it's 12 times. So there is a graphic say that they are below 10,000, okay, in this case cores, and they are achieving 86,400 cores on this NAMD. And again, this is going through why all of this, because Microsoft is on one of those conference that I would love to participate. That's called the Supercomputing 2020, and that's where they announced this. All of these big announcements with Azure HPC and AI supercomputing that they are helping us to just get a little bit closer to this end of the pandemic. And that's the part that I love about this. It's the efforts during these times of crisis. We already mentioned that, I think, a few podcasts a few podcasts ago, that the way that this changing our world and changing even our technology, it's absolutely brilliant. And that's the part that I like about
Microsoft is really Microsoft is really right at the front line of that. Creating and providing these immense, is there a bigger word? Really immense computing powers, and medical and science organizations, scientists, they're using these to do good things. So they're calculating things about the pandemic. They're using all of this compute, all of the data throughput to process different feedbacks and different data sets that they've got, so they can do advanced modeling. And instead of waiting a week, they're making sure that we can do this in a day, kind of a thing, right? So we read about the benchmarking in that article. It was taking, I think, something like 640 VMs using 64 parallel processes per VM. And they were the 287 terabytes of distributed memory. 287 terabytes.
It's unbelievable.
Memory. It is. So it's very impressive, very amazing. And this really ties in to our next one, kind of hand in hand, the Azure High Performance Computing at Supercomputing 2020. So again, the SC20 conference that you were talking about in the previous posting, this one is very much related. So they're talking about OpenAI, and they're talking about partnerships in this one. Did you want to expand on this one a little bit?
Yeah. So this is the part that they are partnership, especially with a lot of the COVID that is happening, and they're already doing that. They have a lot of things going on. They partnership with AMD. It's one of the parts that now they're going, if I'm not mistaken, on the third generation that we not mentioned on the previous post, that they are doing that, going with the third generation of AMDs, and they are just building all of this massive footprint to just help us going on this. So universities, the example over here is the Duke University and the Convid Moonshop on the UCB, that they are doing all of this to just become available. They are using, and if you read the blog post, is they are using the NVV4 of virtual machines, and they are using of course the graphical interface, the graphic process units, the GPUs of NVIDIA, to just realize that this is where they're going, and that's where they are going on that, right?
Yeah, and I was just looking at that same post that you've got up there, and the throughput on these new these A100 Tensor Core GPUs, 200 gigabits per second InfiniBand networking, and that's on the NVIDIA hardware, the Azure NDV4 100 VM.
Yeah. It is amazing. It is amazing what they are doing. And for us geeks, it's like, I don't think I'm going to have I don't know what the future reserves, but it's amazing what they are doing. It's just literally blows my mind. And it's great that we can see really the truly benefit of the cloud, seeing for these types of environments, right? That's really important.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a really good segue, talking about all these supercomputing announcements and almost really superpowers. When I think about how powerful and yet scalable all of these things are. So imagine, in Azure, we have a lot of medical data to model, you're not limited to one supercomputer, right? You're talking about Azure here. So I don't know how I can think about that any differently. I need to get my whiteboard out, Marco. That's what I need to do.
So continuing on this, last week we talked about the networking. Just moving on, we're still on infrastructure, but now moving on. Our good friend Mark Russinovich, CTO of Azure, released the part 2 of this great blog post, and talking about the advanced global network. And now it shows one of the things that shows really the benefit that they are doing regarding the networking. And the first we talk about the backend route. I think it's the intention of these two parts was the backend at first, and then moving on, doing the last mile, like they like to say, on this blog post. It's where he says about the last mile, the different Microsoft POPs, the point of presence on internet, and using the local ISPs to just optimizing what's called the last mile resilience for the Azure peering service.
Exactly. So for a long time, that last mile has been a bit of a challenge, especially in a larger physical area country such as Canada.
Especially in Canada.
We have, especially in Canada. I'm trying to be politically correct. I'm being Canadian. So
we are Canadian, but we need to know what it is in our country, right?
It's true. So in Canada, speaking very honestly, we do have some challenges with last mile.
Yes.
And really what we're talking about with this blog post, what the post is about BGP. So providers, telecoms, have been using BGP, Border Gateway Protocol, to route most optimum routes for your data on that last mile. This is especially prevalent for commercial connections, office connections, MPLS, that kind of a thing. But now Microsoft is taking this a bit of a step further, where they're incorporating all of that information in how they also apply routing. So we're really talking about the further optimization, more redundancy. So in part 1, the article, part 1 spoke to using design principles, ensuring there was redundancy. We're choosing the most optimized paths. Now, they're using some kind of fun acronyms in the article here. My favorite one is RADAR, the Route Anomaly Detection and Remediation. So it's a lot like we were talking in last week's kind of chat about that. Was, we spoke about the automated monitoring and then taking actions on that, right? So that's what that is, really. So, if one route is bad, we'll have a lower rating. It's going to use a different route, but then it's also going to look at the less good route and find, is there different optimizations that can be done in an automated way? Can something be fixed? Can it be rerouted in a different path? To achieve a better rating, lower latency, for example, and then become a more usable choice. So it's automating all of that, sending it to humans, to engineers when it's needed, using software, logic, and functions, all of these things. So when we think about putting together the whole solution, we're really utilizing an awful lot of logic and automation in these services and how they're being delivered. And I think it's kind of, to me, it's what Azure is.
It is.
It allows, So there's a really cool, if you go about halfway down in there, there's kind of a cool diagram about the software-driven WAN, the SWAN. And I think that kind of shows it. So there's some different routes available in that diagram. And, if something happens on one, it reroutes to another. And it's all it's things that happen, for an ISP, for example, on the internal infrastructure, the actual physical wiring, it happens automatically for the most part now. But this is at a way bigger scale.
And the interesting part over here is we are not talking. So on the first blog post or the previous week, the last podcast, we talk about this, and we talk about on the black fiber on internal Microsoft, right? This one, it's not only Microsoft. Microsoft just goes to the POP, right? To the point of presence. That's where you start. So they mentioned that part. All of this, and I'm going back again to the beginning. All of this is the last mile. What the last mile means is, like you mentioned, the local ISP. So it's the effort that Azure, in this case Microsoft, is doing with the local ISPs to enable the BGP, in this case on their systems, to allow them to go on this very cool radar technology or radar system and to a software driven wide area network. So as you can as they can see, the listeners in our podcast, if you are following us on YouTube, you can see on the screen, you can look at the way that you can improve your service as a local ISP, right? And of course, at the end, it will magically happen for Azure as well, because it's the point, it's the last mile of resilience that they need. Because if we have problems on your data center or on your connection to Azure and you are depending on that, guess what? The solution doesn't work correctly, and it's not like pointing to the cause, but they need to see end to end. And that's the part that, again, it's really cool just to see how Microsoft, it's not only working on their side, but they are looking from since the customer until the reach. They see the whole picture, and those two blog posts just show what they are doing regarding that. That's pretty cool, right?
Absolutely. So I think, this, when I sit back and think, I reread the conclusion a little bit here earlier, and I think it's really interesting. So this really speaks to me about how from Azure, but how Azure, Microsoft, responds to supporting people consuming resources. So I think about all the different situations we've had for connectivity. And the reality is not every business has ExpressRoute. A small business may utilize Azure services, but they may not be able to have ExpressRoute, maybe, lots of different reasons, right? So using VPN, using simply an open internet connection to go to a remote desktop, for example.
Yeah.
So there's lots of, distributed challenges. And this is really going to help I think the Microsoft engineers determine where I don't want to say failure, that's not the word, but maybe a sticky point, maybe a problem, and they can identify it. And if it's on their side, it will, if not right away, they'll have automation in place to heal that, to pick a different route, for example.
Exactly. At least to have the resilience.
Then, like you said,
you probably don't have the fastest, but you have the resilience of having that way that you can achieve that. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And what is great is because, like you mentioned, ExpressRoute, it's not the solution. I've been on organizations that they have a very widespread internet, and when they are close to POPs, different POPs, and one of the main POPs in North America, it's, for example, it's Chicago. When you are close to the POP, sometimes ExpressRoute doesn't make any sense, to be very honest. I've been benchmarked at the beginning. For here in Canada, it does make, especially on out of West, it does make sense to have have express route, for example, instead of Azure VPN. And the reason, of course, is the low latency, because we are close to the West data centers than to the East, but our POP we don't have, as far as I know. And please, if anyone knows, just tell us on a message, or shoot an email, or in this case any kind of Twitter, just to tell us if there is any pop on out of West in Canada, especially.
Yeah, Western Canada.
Canada.
And that has been a problem that you and I have had to address with businesses out west here. And that latency is really kind of a bee in the bonnet, right? It makes it feel slow and unresponsive.
And it's not only that, we don't have a data center in West, in Canada. Our region,
that's right.
It's Canada Central, that is in Toronto, and Canada East, that is in Quebec, I think.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, have you ever seen the cost for an MPLS from Calgary to Toronto? I have. It makes me want to run back out into the mountains.
Exactly. It's way cheaper.
And then they told me that was a monthly number.
It's way cheaper to go, for example, to Seattle. That is when is one of the regions. Yeah. The Calgary West, not Calgary West, but the US West, either US West or US West.
And there is some offerings in Calgary from different ISPs. I don't want to mention names. I know that there's 2 offerings in Calgary for express route demarcs, and the latency is maybe 8 milliseconds faster than just using Azure VPN.
Yeah.
Now, that was last year. I'm going to say it's been a year since I've done any benchmarking partnered with an ISP on that. But, a year is a long time, so maybe things have changed a bit. But it is a challenge. And, there's different areas, provinces, counties, and things like that where internet service, we don't always have fiber. So a good example is, I'm working from my home office a lot these days, of course, like everybody. And in my neighborhood here in the city of Calgary, I can't get fiber. So, there's these weird challenges. Yes.
I'm waiting for mine.
Shovel to dig my own trench.
I'm waiting for mine, but I learned a lot on this year to be patient, and doesn't matter. Okay,
and we're just home users.
Exactly.
So let's talk about
the next
Azure
one.
Hybrid benefits.
Exactly. This is, for me, it's huge. Azure benefits now extends to Linux. So this was one of the things that if you create VMs, especially on Windows, that you already have that, and especially of those organizations that have enterprise agreements, right? They can extend the licensing and make those VMs running cheaper on Azure. So now they extend this on Linux, and this coming on the Kubernetes conference, and they all have launched this close to the Kubernetes conference, and Azure Open Day that was a few days ago. Great conference, by the way.
Yeah.
And the reason that they are doing this, it's basically there was a challenge for organizations that they want to use Red Hat and SUSE, and that they already have those licensing with them, and they are still valid, to just going to the cloud. So the old times for this is that you need to deploy your own image to just not having that cost, right? Otherwise, if you want to use the Azure Marketplace and the portal to just deploy a VM with Linux, the price is already included. So now you have the possibility of even those VMs getting cheaper because you already pay for the license. It's really great news.
Exactly. Yeah, and one of the other things that they highlight in this article, and you and I ran into this last year on a project, Red Hat and SUSE support for Azure So we can now get co-located technical support from Azure, Red Hat, and SUSE. That's actually a very small little sentence, but a really big step because the support was a little bit complex, I want to say, before. So, licensing is a very sticky thing. You have to make sure all of your licensing is well in order and well documented, so you can have your license numbers ready and you can call 1-800-HELP-ME. And
I thought that was 1-800
to help you.
No?
Well, you can try. I can. So it's the same with networking as the way I think of, myself in Linux. I know enough to get into trouble and cause some problems. So we can have some fun.
For sure. At least we can help you dig in your issue. We might not be able to find a solution immediately, but we will find a solution. Until so far.
We will get there.
The part that I like about this announcement that was hidden there, like you mentioned, is a recent announcement that now for Red Hat and SUSE, they have support for Azure shared disks. And this is huge. Yeah. This is huge because now if you have a cluster, you don't need to deploy another cluster just for having those file systems and failover clusters available on Azure. So now by simple having a shared disk among two VMs, you have all the failover that you need, and it will simplify your deployment, and at the end it will reduce your costs.
Exactly. Another cost reduction. So the one that I got excited about was the compatibility with Azure Arc as well, because as you and I know at least, and hopefully our listeners or viewers will start to learn more about Azure Arc, really bridging the management gap between wherever your systems and resources are. So you can manage your hybrid environments. And I'm talking about not just Azure. I'm talking about on-prem. I'm talking about Google Cloud. I'm talking about AWS or, Bob's data center. It doesn't matter. Azure Arc bridges the gap for that and brings everything all together so that, you can manage all of those resources in one interface. So, yeah, it's like Server Manager on steroids. Yeah. It's really fantastic. It is. So,
talking about Server Manager,
I know,
and moving on to the next, because then we're going to have like a very long podcast. Our podcasts are not that small or short. We do tend to share a lot of our point of view. Moving on to the next one is the boost of performance with Azure Files SMB multi-channel. This is one of the things that I was expecting a lot of time, having multi-channel on SMB, and now we can have it. It's really cool to have this, right?
Absolutely. So this kind of I think kind of piggybacking a little bit on the high performance computing, the supercomputing kind of announcements. So more throughput, way higher IOPS, and network fault tolerance. That's one of the things that is really critical in all of these applications that run in business today. So we're not talking just about uptime anymore. We're talking about failover. And of course, along with everything in all of these performance improvements, Azure teams are really putting a lot of forethought into the cost optimization. So in the blog post, they talk about, not just, I want to kind of rewind that statement a bit. So Marcos, do you remember, let's say 10 years ago, we would take a physical, let's say it's going to be a database server. And that's maybe not a good example, but I'm going to stick with it. So let's say we're going to run SQL Server on it. And average utilization on our physical server is maybe 45%. Well, that's not really ineffective use. And that's why I said SQL might be a bad example, because we also have to plan for peak usage on SQL. But, an average VM carrying just a business workload, we want to really peg those resources quite a bit higher. So we want to utilize what we're paying for. So we're having hardware, we have disks that are, physically attached to those physical servers back in the day, I'll say. And, we have memory. We may need to have more memory added or whatever. And we have processing. Not only that, we have licensing, both for our Windows Server and for whatever software is going to be running as an application or something like that on there. So we want to make sure that we're utilizing all those resources and all those things that we're paying for as a business already. So 45% utilization is not great. We really want to see that over 80. Over 90 is even better. That way we know we're giving business value and they can see a little bit of return on investment, right? So I want to stay away from some of the acronyms because I've heard a lot of 3- and 4-letter acronyms today. Sorry. But nonetheless, so this is a good example of Azure thinking about how people can utilize the resources, how businesses, I should say, can utilize resources that they're subscribing to in Azure. So the cost optimization, better IOPS, better throughput, lower latency, and increased redundancy. So faster, more of it, better service, more reliable, and less cost. This is just a huge win for Azure right here. I know. Yeah. Come on, Microsoft. Where's my referral?
And by the way, we are not paying to say all these things. This is our true.
No, actually,
opinion.
It's fun, right? Because we get excited about technology, and as technology evolves and changes over time. I find myself getting excited about announcements like this, to be honest.
To be honest, it's not only the excitement for me that, of course, that excitement is the big part. But one of the things that I really drives me is we've been on this situation before, okay? And sometimes, especially we are architects and we build solutions and we coming as the, let's say, the thinkers to organization, right? We have to propose solution that works and they stay for quite a good time to just recover the investment, right? The return on investment that you mentioned. And sometimes we're trying to not overkill, because you cannot kill like a fly with a cannonball, right? But it's not applicable in a lot of times to just deploy, for example, a lot of those awesome softs cluster, the scale out file server clusters that we know that they can do all of this. And Azure File, in this case on the storage, now having multi-channel with the SMB, it just realized that we're starting to migrate this, right, to the cloud. We're starting to have more workloads on the cloud, consuming those files, moving a lot of those file servers to the cloud. And now we're starting to see a bottleneck that a lot of people, especially on the VDI world, that they are using very intensively, and especially if you are using VDI on the very high demand, like with graphic interface and everything else. Those files are huge. Those files are ginormous. And you basically are open the file, are editing the file, are committing the file, whatever it are that you are doing. And be able to have all of this first, multi-channel like you mentioned, the IOPS, so the performance, and everything else is going to be really cool, right?
Yeah, so I think of a number of businesses that I've been involved with over the years, and probably 70%, give or take, have used VDI, and of that 70%, almost all of them have used some kind of a designer software like AutoCAD. So those can be very heavy resource-wise on a VDI environment. So the advantage to this, I think it continues to grow, right? So now we can use more different kind of CAD resources in the VDI environment. We can put less emphasis on worrying about how many people are logging into, for example, our a special server for that and routing them, load balancing all those resources across everything. So it can get a little bit complicated when we have those high demand users, but the increased throughput is really going to be huge for those giant kind of design files because they're bloody big. So, we're talking about some. I've seen a couple that have been pretty close to a terabyte, and it just happens. There's lots of different best practices for that, and certainly not to make them that big as one.
Exactly.
But it does happen. So again, all these different applications that have these high data throughputs and larger files. Even running reports, building those reports out. So so many different technologies that we'll be able to build on top of and run much faster. Really
exciting. So let's move on to the last news that was released this week and talks about the Azure backup for Azure PostgreSQL for a long-term retention. Again, this is a brand new feature. It's in preview. Those are the features that we want to talk about it because they are in preview. Once again, I just want to disclaim that if it's in preview, it's not to deploy in production. We already talked about that several times. Okay, it's just for us to test.
But it is important because it continues to happen to businesses, right? So we get excited about new technology, as does a lot of people, and we have to be aware. We should not deploy a preview anything in production. First and foremost, because it's not stable. It's in preview. It's not ready for production. Second, because if you do, you will 99% most likely have to redeploy that solution after it becomes production from preview. So there's lots of other concerns in there, but those are the two biggest ones, and certainly we have to be careful with that. So testing tenants, dev test, whatever it is that you use, non-production wise. But so for PostgreSQL, we do now have a 10-year retention for granular backups and restores, right? And this is pretty exciting because it's a native service now, right? It's just kind of baked in to the PostgreSQL product, and it makes it easy to consume, easy to use, and when backups are easy to do, that means we're more likely to do them.
Exactly. And backups, it's always a good way to just going into disaster recovery, right? And that's the part that that I like about that is going on that perspective on having the disaster recovery and everything. So that is a very good way to segment this and to finalize this on that way, right?
Absolutely. So one of the other important things announced in that blog post is that it's a restore anywhere. So you can trigger point-in-time restore to the source server or any other Azure database for PostgreSQL. And that's actually pretty important because it means we don't have to restore to the same server. I know it's saying it a different way, but it's good to understand that. So, for Microsoft SQL, it's pretty easy to restore to a different server. You're just putting the database in, restoring your log and all of those good things. But for PostgreSQL, it's now quite similar. So we just can restore to the same or to a new server. Very cool feature to have in there. And the fact that it's there for 10 years with the long-term retention, for me, that's actually quite attractive because, again, cost control. PostgreSQL can be lower cost than some other solutions for SQL. Or you may have an application that requires you use Postgre for some reason, and you just need to have it. Sure. But now with the long-term retention, it blends in with all of your other solutions. And, that 7 and 10-year standard is really, I suppose it's just that. It's the standard.
Exactly.
So, the other thing, as I was saying it, just kind of came out wrong there, but that's okay.
No one will listen to this. That's okay.
So I think the other thing, for me, the last point I want to talk about under PostgreSQL Backup is RBAC-based access to the database. So it's now, this new backup feature is also fully Azure AD RBAC compatible. And that's really cool because it means we can assign roles with it, right?
Especially for the DBAs that they want to try to see or something like that, to just grab a subset of data sets that they want to do it, and everything else we don't need to basically restore everything and giving like a new server and all of that. So we can attach them a group or something like that then they can belong. We can easily move them or something like that. Yeah, totally agree with you. So it's the end of our this weekly podcast. Unfortunately, I know that we have material to talk for hours. It's our nature, but I don't think that our listeners will appreciate that. So again, Andrew, thank you very much for being part of this. It's starting to be our night, right, before we release these on Mondays. And now we have this already starting to get a little bit more familiar with these podcasts and everything else. It's starting to get easy and more natural. So once again, thank you, Andrew. Our subscribers, please help us grow. Give a thumbs up, subscribe, and share if you like the content, and give us feedback. If you like this new weekly way that we are doing this podcast, just give it thumbs up. Right, Andrew?
Absolutely. Yes. Please thumbs up, like it, share it, tell your friends. And, we really hope that you enjoy our content and that you learn maybe just one thing and have a bit of fun.
Exactly.
I know this is a lot of fun for me. And, of course, thank you so much for having me again this week, Marcos. Appreciate it.
Right.